All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football Podcast. This is your host, Andrew. And today I've got some very special guests. We've got Jonny Hancock and Stu Kerby of the Ale and the Vale Podcast, which is a fan-run podcast about Port Vale Football Club, currently in League Two, the fourth tier of professional English football. Jonny and Stu, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to each other, Tom.
It's a pleasure. So, Jonny, let's start with you, mate. Could you tell us your first memory of football?
First memory of football is actually the World Cup in '98. France '98 is the first memory of football, and seeing Michael Owen skip past the Argentinians. So yeah, that's my first memory of football. Being in a pub with my dad and his friends and stuff like that, and watching the World Cup at that stage, being 9 years old.
Mine's a bit older because I'm much older than Jonny to start off with. And then, I can just kind of remember at 3, my dad having me on the sofa watching Mexico '86 with England playing. And I don't remember any of it really per se. But and then my dad used to take us to games in the late '80s. And I can remember, because I was quite into Liverpool back in the time, my dad took us in the commentary end in 1990 to watch Liverpool secure the title in Highfield Road in 1990.
Amazing.
In the home end, and I had a full Liverpool kit on. So you can judge me at that point for many things, but I was full.
You're brave, if nothing else. Very brave. Yeah.
Brave at that time for sure.
Yeah. Like Jonny, one thing that stuck out to me, right, is how old were you about when that England or the World Cup '98 experience there?
Yeah, so I was 9 at that point.
Okay.
So
all right.
Was like, yeah, my dad really wasn't interested in live football. He was a Liverpool fan, so he just went to the pub to watch the games and stuff like that. So going to physical football wasn't really a thing in my family. But yeah, France '98 is the first thing that really sticks out, and then it just grew from there, really.
Yeah, and that was, you kind of touched on what my question was going to be, because personally, most a large majority of the football matches I've watched were probably by myself in my basement, because the time difference. Many times, it's the morning, it's like a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and it's not as communal. And I was also as a younger age, now football fortunately has become much more popular and it's more common, but I was one of the few kids who really watched, even on the football teams I played on, right? Even among kids who were interested in playing, I was one of the few who were fanatic about it. And so that's been most of my experience. And so in the last few years, I've had more in stadium, when we talk about going abroad and things, more in stadium. That's been a change. So I'm curious of that difference of okay, watching in the pub, right, with a group of people. I'm sure it was a wild type of scenes when Owen scored that goal, and kind of what the different styles, I guess, or the different kind of feelings of watching at home versus in the pub versus in the terraces.
Yeah, so in England, it's really, really weird. So you've got the home thing where people would have a drink at home, watch the game. You usually have people round. You fill your house. So, for example, the Champions League final, Liverpool-Milan, pretty much the whole street that we lived on congregated in someone's house, watched the Champions League final together. Right. There was the adults were drinking, having a few beers and stuff like that. So that's the sort of atmosphere you get in the house, and then in the pub varies dependent on who's playing, sort of what the atmosphere is inside there, because the British football fan can be very territorial about their football club. So
right.
Even when England are playing, you still get that bit of local rivalry creep in. And then on the terraces, nothing beats that for me. It's such a complete different feeling. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and Stu, you mentioned that being a kid, having the stones to wear the other clubs' kit in the home end. When would you say was kind of when you started like regularly going to the football like on your own, right? So not just with dad there, but saying, hey, like this is something for me, and like I want to be a part of week in, week out.
Well, my dad, up until I moved to Canada, still goes. So, well, he still goes by himself now. So me and my dad have pretty much always gone together. Probably like from when we were like, I probably used to go to a few more games than him, just because he didn't like traveling away games as much. But for home matches, we were pretty much always there. Like, very weirdly, my brother supports Crewe, who are
Okay.
8 miles down the road down
Yeah.
in Cheshire, because we were sort of split between the middle back at the time. So my brother started going there with his friends, and I didn't want to because I didn't feel any connection with the club
Exactly.
whatsoever.
It's a
So
derby, right?
yeah. So me and my dad started to go to watch Vale, and we got that connection with the club pretty much straight away. And so that was 1992 that we started going there. Vale got relegated that season, so that's a pretty strong feeling that I've had throughout supporting Vale for the last 32 years. Seen them get relegated 4 times, I think. So the realistically, like my dad just didn't go to as many booze up away games as I did, where we'd get on the train at 9 o'clock in the morning and never seemed to fancy that as much, which is fair enough because he's 73 now, so
a little different, a different way. And you actually went right into my next question there, because one thing I've always, again, is kind of on my football bucket list is like the away day experience. So what is that? I mean, and of course, yeah, there's going to be varying levels depending on someone's, maybe one of the big factors is their penchant for, for getting on the beers. But what is that like? But not only the day, if you could spell what that day kind of looks like, but then that feeling of like, hey, kind of being in opposition territory type of thing.
Well, for me, it's always been you're going off with your mates for the day. Like even if you're in the car, I think Jonny goes quite a lot in the car with his pals, and we used to do that quite a bit as well. But we'd try and make it a train journey, or if we could, if it was possible. So you get on a train early, you can have a few beers on the train. There's lots of other teams traveling, fans traveling around the country at the same time. So if you're all heading into London on the same train or stuff, you pick teams up on the way through. So you're picking Birmingham City or West Brom or Wolves up when you get through Birmingham and Wolves and Wolverhampton, and then you're going down further down. By the time you get off, the train's absolutely packed, stinks of alcohol, and you get off, and then you're making your own way off, and you'll see each other at 6 o'clock on the train back. But for me, I love away days. I love away days probably more than home days, if I'm honest, because they're just more fun. It's just you're in with the hardcore at that point. That's it. Like everybody else has travelled. Like there's 400 of you. Like we've gone up to Carlisle all together, and Jonny's got me in on a kids ticket because he's gone and bought me one just up the street, and I wasn't going to get away with it at 26. So, but at that point, you're in there, and all 400 of you haven't just gone because it's a nice afternoon, because it's you're there because you all 400 of you want to win that game, stick it to the away fans, 2 fingers up when the goal goes in, and that's pretty much the feeling when the ball goes in at away games. Just pretty special.
Yeah, Jonny, would a lot of that ring true for you as well, or is it a bit better or a bit different? Let's say in the car. What are away days like for you?
No, I think like what Stu just said, pretty much it's the nail on the head. I drive a lot of the away games just because of having a little one now. So it's just easier for the hangover on a Sunday isn't so much fun when you've been woken up at 5 a.m. by a little one wanting play. And so I drive majority of them, but it doesn't stop the experience. We get the same sort of atmosphere going down. There's always music going on in the car. There's always like laughter, usually around some form of gambling, because we're all talking about betting on the way down, because that seems to be a very football orientated thing in this country. Is you pop an accumulator on. So one of your friends will have a stupid tenfold on that's never going to come in a month of Sundays, and then someone else will have a threefold on of favourites that returns back about. So you get that sort of difference with the away games. But like Stu said, once you're there and in, it's amazing feeling watching the ball at the back of the net for especially some places now, because some of the places you go, there's some real big clubs in the lower divisions now. Like you've got likes of Bradford City, who have got 10,000 people there, and you go score a goal there. I remember the last promotion season where we got a penalty late on at Bradford, and it's just things like that are just a great feeling.
Yeah, just stick with you. And kind of before we get into the story of the podcast and how that came to be with you guys, I think an interesting thing, and I'm still learning. Like, I've been following English football for probably 20 years now. I'm still obviously I had like my own path to it, and I missed a lot of, let's say, a lot of, like, I know some of the history and things, and different clubs at different times are stronger. But when you say like a big club, right? Like, and you said like Bradford City there, which for in the lower leagues, 10,000, that is like a great gate, right? Like, that is great attendance. What do you think, like, and then it's easier to say, okay, if a team is in the Premier League, they must be a big club, right? But it could be the case with like a Luton, right? Or now, like, where they might not be, even though they did make it to the Premier League, they might not necessarily be considered like a big club or have that pedigree. Like, what goes into that when you're saying, hey, this is a bigger club? Obviously there's an element that is like relative based on the levels, but what do you think kind of is, like, if you could put your finger on like what makes a club like a bigger club or something like that?
For me, it's the history. So you look at some clubs, and like you mentioned Luton there, they've been up and down the leagues. We've played Luton multiple times over the years, and stuff like that. So you look at that. You look at Bournemouth, for example. Bournemouth battered us 5-0 on the last game of the season, which pretty much kept them safe at that point. And we've looked at teams like that, but your big clubs in English football, you look at your Portsmouths, who were in our league, in League One last year, and they've now finally gone up. Your Boltons, your Derbys that are in there, that are getting 20,000-30,000 people in for third division football as it is.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing. It's the whole package of a club. They've got something about them, but they've got a fan base as well.
You could argue, for instance, that Milton MK Dons could be a big club because they get 10,000 in every week, but they're not a big club because they didn't exist until 20 years ago. So, or 23 years ago, whatever the hell it was. But they're like, so for me, it's fan base and history. Like Jonny says, like, I've seen us play Bournemouth many a time, and I've seen us play Luton plenty of times. I've seen us relegate Luton or play them on the opening day when they started with minus 30 points and ended up getting relegated out of the top 4 divisions. And it's awesome that they're back, because it gives all of us a bit of hope that maybe one day, if we just hit on the right
exactly, yeah,
on
could
the
be
right
us, right?
mixture of things that happen and everything plays into it once, that maybe at some point or another we could do that. But like, yeah, it's I'm just looking at the League Two table now, and like there are some decent sized clubs. Like Notts County is still in there. You've got Swindon Town, you've got
historic
Bradford City.
club.
Yeah, they're all reasonably sized clubs. They've normally played near the top end of the divisions for a long period of time as well. So yeah, they're just it's great to see. But I always think that Vale are probably a big side in that division as well.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part of what, for us in the United States, we don't really have a conception of, is like promotion, relegation. It's not just like titles necessarily, although that helps, but it's, where for what percentage of a club's history have they spent their time, right? Where have they been knocking around? And it changes, right? And clubs kind of have their ups and downs. I think that's part of the great part. Like for me with like the Vale, which we'll get to now, like have always kept an eye on them, but it wasn't until the promotion season a few years ago that it like kind of like reignited that interest, right around like November, December. I was like, okay, things might be picking up here. Like, just kind of gets you thinking of that. And so there's a lot more to play for than in like the US model of, hey, it's Super Bowl or bust, right? Or it's
status as well.
Bust, yeah.
Some of it's status as well. Like the fact that we're a League Two club at the moment, our status is down as far as I'm concerned, because I always think of us as sort of like a League One club, really, that sort of bounces between there. And like my history of Vale is basically seeing us play a large share of my early years in the Championship, what is now the Championship. So I've seen us play at that level. So I've got no reason why we can't possibly do that again. So to see us, and I didn't see us play in the bottom tier until 2008, I think. So I didn't see us playing the fourth tier in 2000 till 2008. Whereas I go with people that are 60, 70 years old, that basically their history is that we were always at the fourth tier, or we were in the third division north or something like that. And we weren't a great side at that point, and we'd be getting 2,000-3,000 in. And that's not my history with Vale at all. And Jonny will have a different history, because Jonny only turned up when they won the trophy in LDV Vans trophy in Cardiff, and like his is different. And so like it's all, but Jonny's never seen us play in the Championship, so like it's all a strange concept to it, and it's all a mix.
It's great. The like you each kind of had a little bit different answers, and so that gives so much fodder for the football debates and the talk, and like really that kind of that concept of, hey, what kind of club, what size club, or where do we belong, right? And so I'd like to switch from kind of that general to more your guys' story with the podcast, right? Of obviously being big fans and supporters, having a passion for the club, but what were some of those initial chats and whispers, and what led to you guys ultimately saying, hey, we're gonna get organized, get together, press record, and put it out and see if anybody cares to listen?
Yeah, so it was Stu deciding to move to the other side of the world, really. He moved to Canada, and then lockdown happened, and everyone felt a bit away from everything. You were away from your friends, family, sort of thing. And a big thing for a lot of football fans is you're away from your Saturday, you're away from your football, which it's so good and bad for your mental health, football is, that it's great when you're with your friends, you get away from reality for a little bit, you're in that little bubble, and then you find yourself not being able to leave the house, and that little bubble's gone, and you're scrolling through social media, try and get that bit of a bite, but because no one's going, it's a bit like, okay. And then Stu just messaged out the blue and just said, look lads, I'm thinking of doing this, would you be interested? And yeah, it escalated from there.
Yeah, I think for me, when we moved here in December 2018 to where we got to at the pandemic, I think I was losing my connection with something that's very, very important to me, and it's still important to me now. And I didn't want to lose that connection. I didn't want to, as sad as it is, I didn't want to lose my connection to Jonny, who I've been going to Vale with since probably 2007. And even though he's a bit of a tosser, I genuinely still like spending time with him and the other people.
It's beautiful still.
Yeah,
beautiful words.
Beautiful. Yeah. And all the other people that we used to play football with, and and all the people that we used to hang around with at away games and home games and stuff like that, is just like, it's an important piece for me. And so, yeah, I wanted to, it was just probably maybe a selfish move on my part, that like I wanted to maintain that connection to the club. And but yeah, just picking Jonny, and always wanted to do it with Jonny, because me and him argue incessantly about pretty much everything to do with the club. So I felt like that would make good fodder. And then we needed some kind of
100%.
A third foil in the middle of us, which was Beza, who I thought would be some kind of devil's advocate almost, to sort of like put between me and Jonny. And in the end, it actually turned out that I was the middleman between Beza and Jonny, who turned out to be the real stars of the show.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's, well, you say it's selfish. I don't think it's selfish when, it's something that you love and is a passion, and it was really a move to stay more connected, right? So I think that that's a great illustration of like what the football means, obviously. And Jonny, you were saying how you guys were missing that specific thing that, during the pandemic, and then Stu, just to keep you connected across, across the ocean and time zones, is a pretty awesome thing. Well, like listening to it, obviously, I would probably listen to most things just about the Vale for me to feel connected, right? Because I'm just like some guy totally floating in space, right? In the East Coast of the US, there's not many Vale fans about. And as a way for me to be connected to something that I don't have that much of the personal experience with, right? And so I think, in that sense, it's helped other people too. So Stuart, I appreciate, your selfishness, quote unquote, in that case, of doing that. And then, but like, it really is a good listen, right? Like I've listened to other podcasts about things I'm interested in, and I turn it off after 5 minutes, or I turn it off for 10, because it just something just isn't there, right? But it really is, it is a good listen. And you guys have won some like some plaudits and things as well, isn't that right?
Yeah, I think after I left though. But
perfect timing.
But the idea behind the pub was behind it was essentially that it was us three essentially chatting in the pub, as we would do before a game or after a game, and we'd be talking through some of the aspects of what's happened at the club during the week, or like, and we planned it out relatively, didn't we, Jonny? Like at the start, I'm not sure how much planning goes into it now, but like we have topics that we talk about, but it's mainly like it will be 3 bullet points or something like that, and then we've got that's how I used to do it, was 3 bullet points, and we'd go in there, and that was it, and that's how we wanted to do it. And especially with the guests that we've had on as well, in terms of when we've had guests on, yeah, we've had a pretty strong list, but we wanted it to flow. We wanted it to become a conversation where the guy basically, it's like bringing the pub analogy back in, that the guy just sat down at the table with us at the pub, and we were just going to have a conversation with him because we knew he used to play for Vale, and we want to hear some stories of what it was like to play at Vale. And that's kind of the whole gist. The gist of it was that, and we knew that. I think we knew that some other people had gone into podcasting and done similar things, but I genuinely believe that the connection that probably me, Jonny, and Bez had prior to doing it is better than just picking random people from a message board to try and do it. And so that probably helped. And we spent a lot of time together over probably 9 years, didn't we, Jonny, playing football together and at football matches. So I genuinely think that helps.
Yeah, and I think the big thing for me is that when we do it, we keep it raw. We don't really edit anything out unless something's gone catastrophically wrong. We don't tend to deviate from the conversation. So if it goes down a rabbit hole, we're going and we're having that conversation. If it's ends in an argument, it's an argument. We're friends enough to have that ding dong and then move on to the next point and end up agreeing on something, because that's football for us. It's like we're so passionate about it, but we also realise we're friends at the end of it, so it doesn't really matter what's said, because it never gets personal, and that's how we manage it. It's you, and that I think that's one of the real reasons why we're still doing it, because it's enjoyable. It's the last season wasn't the best, obviously, the relegation,
it was tough at times.
Yeah. But it's also a bit of therapy then, talking to people, then realizing you're not alone. The other people are feeling the same, and you're not taking that into Monday then and thinking I'm still angry about it and stuff like that. So that's there's a lot of real good that it does for me recording, and to a lot of people that listen, they say that like it's nice to hear that people are saying the same things, and we've garnered a real good strong relationship with the club through it. In the sense that we can say what we want, but the club know that it's not personal, it's not an attack, but we can say what we want still. Like we will say when things are rubbish, we'll say when things are great. But the be all and end all of it is we all want the best for the club. So there's nothing that's off bounds really.
Right. I think the interesting part too is like, one, on just like, let's say like the success of the pod and just how engaging and entertaining it is kind of those personal relationships that are at the base of it. And like you said, Stu, it's like you've had these arguments over over a pint thousands of times, so just the same, and your friendship is still here. But I think you got to my next point, Johnny, is like the relationship with the club, because when you're talking about the area of Burslem or the greater Stoke-on-Trent area and the connection with Vale, like it's a smaller area and a more close-knit area than the average professional sports franchise in the United States, which could be hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And if I was to start a podcast about a certain team, it could be much harder to get that access. But I think because you guys are just fans and you've made the podcast out of that passion, it kind of sets the tone with the club, where it's different from somebody on the BBC saying things to get like headlines or clicks and kind of being a bit outrageous, whereas you guys, it really comes from the heart. But how has that been, like, to actually get, for example, I think a great accomplishment of the pod is to have, then manager Andy Crosby on the pod during the season at a really difficult point in the season, right? Like, it shows the relationship and the trust. Also credit to Andy and to the club for like giving you guys that access. But kind of what goes into those conversations, or how do you think you've been able to develop that kind of connection with the club to have that access?
It's just honesty, and that is all it is. From the start, we had Carol, the chairwoman, on the second or third episode. We'd gone through that time without swearing, and Carol comes on, drops the C-bomb, and we're like, oh, okay, fair enough. That's where this is going now.
Setting the tone. That's leadership.
Yeah, exactly. But we got that relationship quite early with them and said, look, we explained what it was about. We explained what we were going to do. We explained that it wasn't always going to be passion. It wasn't always going to be positive roses. Like, it was going to be real fans talking about real experiences. But the one thing we always said and have always done is said, it's not personal. So on a Saturday when a player's played badly, they will get berated, but he's not rubbish. He performed rubbish. And we try and differentiate massively between the two things, because really feel that, like, there's a lot of social media in this now that's easy to hound someone and pull them out. Do you know what I mean? You look at how England are playing in the Euros at the minute. People are going, oh, Harry Kane's rubbish. He's not. He's just performing rubbish. And there's a massive difference.
It's been navigated quite well, the relationship with the club. I think getting Carol on early, I think she realised we were, three fly-by-night guys that were just doing it for a bit of fun. We were trying to do something a little bit different and try and help us out a little bit along the way. And we've got a strong connection towards mental health, because I think it's been talked about in the podcast that all of us have sort of had some issues along the way, and it was important for us to sort of like talk it out as well as we go along. And some of the podcasts that you listen back to at this point talk about that, and talk about our own issues that we're kind of having with things not necessarily about football either, and outside of the game as well. And I think, I don't know, can't speak for the club per se, but I think that emphasis on those different issues help them tremendously in trying to determine whether you want to work with somebody or not. And we're not, like Jonny said earlier, we're not, or the podcast as it is now isn't sitting in the palms of the club or anything like that. They need the podcast as much as the podcast needs the club. Like, it's a good sounding piece for them, and we get that podcast gets a lot of numbers listening and talking about Vale, and like, I think it's generated interest along the way, and maybe calm people down when it's not been quite going right, or it's ramped things up, and the passion's got going when things are going right, because people are listening to the podcast and feeling in a particular way. And so do genuinely think that helps. And I think, regardless of how the club feels about it, sometimes the pod is actually a benefit to the club overall, because it's talking about something and keeping that story going beyond the 5 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon, going to the next Saturday. There's more time, more content about the club than there was before.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got people like Alfie with his YouTube channel and people like that
Yeah.
that starting to build up.
Kid's
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
exactly. And you've got all of a sudden you've got people not just talking about Vale, for 2 hours every week. You now got people talking about it, and you've got Radio Stoke that are doing great stuff, and they spend more time on it than they ever have done before. And then you've got Baggers, Mike Bagley's column, your name's your surname sharer with his column as well, that's come back, and there's more content about Vale than there ever has been before. And I think it's just been awesome the last couple of years. And like, I know we were kind of the starters on that one, starting pistol on that one, but like, it's good to have everybody in the game, because I think Vale's getting a lot more notice than it did in the past.
Yeah, and I think like you make a great point with now the amount of let's call it focus storytelling. Like, if I made an equivalent to the US, like imagining, your local university having a fan run podcast, having an official podcast, having official, multi issue newsletter per week, like amateur YouTube channels, everything based off of it. And I think, that what you guys are doing does, it's probably in many cases quite representative of what a lot of Vale fans are thinking. Then obviously you have like the comments on, Twitter and the Instagram, people being able to share. And so I think it's a great way for the club to kind of get a litmus test. And it's also one of those things where, again, Johnny, to your point of, not much editing and just being some mates just chatting football, like there's that authenticity that I think the club can't necessarily replicate, because it is the club and it has a certain, not to try to like hide things or put things in a certain light, but I always think, even from like a perspective of like, if you're going to try a new restaurant, like, are you going to listen to the manager of the restaurant who's saying and say, hey, we have the best fish and chips in town? Or are you going to listen to your friend who's like, I went there, they have the best fish and chips in town? Like, who are you going to listen to, right? It's the person who doesn't necessarily have anything to gain from that. And so I think that adds to kind of like that does help the club in that sense. Away from kind of the media side, and that, I'm curious too, with Vale in the community, right? Like, do you see a connection between the club? Obviously, the football side, we want to see victories and promotions and things, but then there is also that role in the community. I'm curious, like, what kind of connection is there beyond maybe just the fans itself, or how does the club play a role in the local community?
No, the club's role in the local community is huge. The one thing that the Shanahan family pride themselves on is the fact that it's not just a Saturday thing. So during the week, they've got something called the Golden Valiants, which is for people that are retired to go down, meet up with other older people, play a bit of bingo, do some dancing, and just have a cup of tea and a bit of food together, just to get people out and about. They've done food banks. They've ran meals. At Christmas time, they wrap presents, take presents to kids that don't have any. There's so much work that goes in the local area. It's untrue. But so much so that at one stage it was actually being used as a stick to beat the club with by some fans. It seemed like they were more focused on off-field image than on-field image. Was a lot of the mantra being out there by certain sections of the fans, and that was hard to see, because the two things are massively separate. They're not
right.
They're not even the same budget. They're not coming from the same pot of money. The foundation side of it is a charity, and it's all completely separate, other than name, from the club. But it was a learning curve for the Carol and the family. They've done more to promote that and show the great work that they do. So yeah, it's brilliant, that work is.
Yeah, it's truly heartwarming to see, I think, more than anything else, just seeing how much those guys, Carol and Kev, have put, how much effort they've put in not only they know how important the club is to the community, like they know, there's not a tremendous amount round Vale Park. Like they've managed to start build and they're continuing to build it. And if you have a look at how much money they've put into the club since the start, like we're over 10 million, I think now. And that's an insane amount of money for somebody to spend on on a club. And we're all disappointed that they went down. Am I prouder of the club than I ever have been before in terms of that, despite the fact that we got bloody relegated again? Yeah, I am actually, because we're not we're not a mess. We don't look like a mess all over the shop. We've got some issues, obviously, on the playing side of things that we need to sort out, and it looks like we might well have done that, and we might be moving in the right direction. But we're starting to be the club that I always wanted us to be, which was thinking strongly about how each action impacts another action, and like these things are special to us. We need to this club special to everybody that watches us, and these people are starting to realize that, which is awesome.
And yeah, and I've even seen and something too that, as I mentioned, like when I was really again, let's say renewing an interest or like coming much more connected on a regular basis to the Vale was the work that like Carol and the family have been doing in the community, especially during the pandemic, filling a lot of need that people had for for meals and giving them resources. Would you say that the role that Vale has in the community around like Burslem, and for people who, to give context, like it's an area that economically has been challenged for a while. Like whenever my family's from there originally. When I tell people from the UK that I went to Stoke-on-Trent, they're like, "Why?" Right? It's not like it's a place that's had challenges. It continues to. So like I would say the need for a club like Vale and the role in the community is even more kind of magnified. But would you say that like the way that Vale connects with the community is kind of like the standard among many clubs in England and the UK, or would you say it's a little bit more like, how would you kind of compare it as far as not only like doing work, charitable work, helping those in need and bringing people together, but like just a presence of representing the people from their community?
It's becoming the standard, I think, is the thing. You see more and more now. My wife, she's a Burton Albion fan, for example. And yesterday, they had 1,000 Burton Albion fans in the ground to meet the new owners, the new manager, and some of their new players and stuff like that. And that's now becoming more the norm. And stuff like when they got there yesterday, they were given a free drink, and it's things like that showing the fans that you value them is becoming more and more normal. And I think it started massively through the Leicester owners, because you'd be seeing every week that the Leicester owners would have put a pie and a pint on for the people that travelled away, or there was a free scarf or free this, that, and the other, and just as a bit of a way as a thank you. And a lot of clubs have picked up on that sort of mantra of actually we need these 200-300 people that have decided that Colchester away on a Tuesday night is a good investment of time and money when you're not doing very well, or people travelling 6 hours because they live completely the opposite end of the country to come on a Saturday, and people flying in from left, right, and centre, or people like Stu and the rest of the Super Vale abroad people that are tuning in. You've got Stu at 6 o'clock in the morning in Canada, and then our friend Nath at 2 a.m. in Australia, sort of thing, tuning in, and it's making sure that them sort of people are captured now. And that's one thing that the club have started to do really well, is look at smaller demographics of our fans to go, we know that the people that come in the ground they're the people that are only going to be really entertained by what's on the pitch. It's how do you keep Stu getting up in the morning on a Saturday when he doesn't have to, and how do you keep people in Australia awake to support the club and put that money in, because it's about looking after everyone now.
Yeah, I think the club's starting to head in that direction and starting to think about some of the other fan base parts of the fan base. I mean, we're quite a small part. I think the Super Vale board. But I mean, the club's good with us from that perspective. You know, now sitting on the committee and the Super Vale abroad stuff, I see exactly how the club interacts with us, which is good. And there's responses from high up people at the club that talk to Super Vale board. Could it be better? Of course it could, but I also have some sympathy towards the club that were worried like in May and June that they were going to hemorrhage 50% of the season ticket holders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I was Vale, I would focus on those people first, and then worry about the however many hundred of Super Vale abroad people that we have afterwards. And I'm proud of them. You know, that's a good choice to make. And now they can come back and, you know, I think, you know, selling 4,500 season tickets after, you know, a pretty miserable season is a commendable effort, and just shows you just how like ingrained quite a lot of people are, and how many new people that we picked up in the last few years from the local community as well that are now starting to get that feeling with the club.
You know, we're talking about like season ticket numbers, like 4,500, which is seen at like obviously in context of last season is seen as really great and above expectations. But to someone listening who might support like a larger club that's routinely getting 40, 50, 60,000 a week for fixtures, they might not really feel a connection or understand that. Do you think the size of the club affects like how close or like the access, right? Like as fans, or affects how much like the club tries to take after the fans? You think it's important, the smaller size? And maybe if Vale did in 5-6 years get to championship level, and now we're getting double, triple the attendance and things, like does that start to change?
There is clubs that have got bigger fan bases than us that have still got fan representatives doing things and have got good relationships with them. But I think as you grow, you've got to look after the people that were there when you were smaller. And so some of the bigger clubs, Man United, etc., for example, that they've not been small for a long time. So this social media presence is completely different for them than it is for a club in our sort of level. So it is difficult to say, really, if that would change. You'd hope not, because the relationships that you've built now, you'd hope stay the same, but they're going to have a larger audience to cater for. They're going to have a larger amount of opinion coming towards them. You see now when we're doing well, and there's more people commenting on things, so they've got more to think about. When it goes wrong, it for them people, it's easier to walk away because they're the ones that they've picked up along the way. Whereas for the diehard, well, it used to be for the diehard 2000. I remember we had Yeovil at home on a Tuesday, and there was like 2,000 people there in the league. Now it seems like we've got a diehard 4,000 fans who, through thick and thin, are renewing season tickets and supporting the club and stuff like that, which is an amazing feat for a city like Stoke and a town like Burslem. But yeah, I'd hope it wouldn't change, but I think some things would have to as well if we scaled up.
I think from my perspective as well is that Vale still look like they care about Dave, who sits in the paddock and isn't happy about something. They still listen to that guy, because it's important to listen to people and hear their opinions. And I think they kind of went away from that a little bit in the last year or so, last year, 2 years or so, while they've been going through some changes. And I think they've come back to that. And I still think that's really important, to have that connection with people that just come to the game and come afterwards and have some thoughts on stuff that, you know, nobody's asking Dave if we should be playing 4-4-2 or 3-4-3, but like, does he want to be moved for part of the season? I mean, Vale were pretty good about that and closing part of the paddock this summer, and they talked to the people that were based in there, and they decided against it in the end, which is great. Like, that's a conversation that they should have. Like, that kind of connection you're not going to get at Manchester United, or you're not going to get at
Yeah.
Liverpool. Like you saw around the Super League stuff, just how little all those billionaires cared about, the guy on the street. And but then you saw the guy on the street fight back because they all got together and they shut it down. And yeah, I still feel pretty proud about uh, fans in this country for that, because that basically killed the competition, and that was pretty special.
Yeah, I think, and thinking about that too, and Johnny, when you mentioned like with United, they haven't been small for a long time, and now so much of football is so global. I mean, right here, case in point. And you talk about all the fan bases and like the preseason tours, whether it's to North America, Asia, whatever that is. You kind of see that maybe from a standard of like profits and like the arms race that is modern football at the top level now. That maybe that international fan base is seen as more important than the diehards who have been there through thick and thin, raising season ticket prices, all that kind of at that top level. It brings me to thinking about, like, for example, with we've got Welcome to Wrexham, where we're kind of bringing this American owner with kind of our conception of what professional sport is to small town in Wales, right? And we see this kind of like for people who have watched the show, this kind of seemingly rags to riches story of going from just a little tiny village essentially, now growing. Now they're in League One. They've just been firing up the levels and don't look like they're going to be stopping anytime soon. What's your guys' perspective on that in terms of like, I guess there's a lot there, right? So there's like the American owner piece, which I know is of concern to many football fans in the UK. There's money in football, even at lower levels, but there is kind of that dream of rising up. Like, what do you guys kind of get from that, and what would you kind of share as your opinions on that?
For me, first and foremost, is that they need to stop calling it a fairy tale, because like every football fan of every club would love somebody with money to come in and go, there's your blank checkbook, go and be the best version of you can be. And that's fine. I've got nothing against that. But then when you sit there and go, oh, it's a fairy tale, it's not. Football's easy at the lower levels if you throw money at it. Paul Mullin scored 30 odd goals in League Two, got promoted to League One, and went to Wrexham in non-league. He didn't go to Wrexham because they went, we've got this amazing project. He went because they went, there's $5,000 a week, Paul. And Paul went, sound, I'm on my way. So, like, I think the thing, what the story is never going to change, because the story is what sells. But Wrexham were a big club before the Hollywood owners came in. They weren't a small club. They were a club that was stuck in non-league because it's hard to get out of the English non-league system unless you throw everything at it. And even then, you're not guaranteed, as Wrexham found out in the first one. But yeah, I've got nothing against it, but package it as it is. It's not a fairy tale.
I've got similar thoughts to Jonny on this one. Yeah, like I remember going to Wrexham and watching people have the car windows put through in about 2003, 2004, because they didn't like. I think we scored a late equaliser or something,
And set fire to the Welsh flag. That was the thing they didn't like.
Yeah, that was probably
That's understandable. Why it might ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, I don't think it went down that well. Maybe that. I mean, Wrexham to me were very similar to lots of other clubs down at that level, and that was, great story that they got picked out by Reynolds and McElhaney, which is, and it's great for them. Do I think that any of these other clubs around, say, like the top 5 tiers, still enjoying the story? I'm sure there's some that are still enjoying the story. Do I think a lot of us have got fed up with it already and hearing now their club special and ours isn't? Then that's the bit that you're gonna have to, like, the more they go up the leagues, the more teams they beat on the way up the leagues, the more annoying everybody's gonna find that story. So there's they tap the well dry, in my opinion, in the UK. in Wrexham for the amount of fans that they're going to get in off the back of that, and they're always going to have these traveling fans that come up and watch the team because of the story and the documentary, which I have watched the first series and did enjoy it, but I also enjoyed the fact that they didn't win and they didn't get promoted at the same time because I found that hilarious. So, and people watch those kind of documentaries like Sunderland Till I Die because of the tragicness of it all on top of everything else. So yeah, I think those things have a shelf life to them. I think maybe they'll keep going with it, but how much new content can they pull out of that story before they've like I said, tapped the well dry of interesting information that they're going to be able to pull out at some point or other. It's just going to be a documentary about football again, and Wrexham are no different to any other club.
From a storytelling standpoint, it might be better if they languish a bit, and who knows what happens.
Well, I think they're going to find it difficult this year. Like they're not going to have the rub of the green the same way they have the last 2 years.
Big jump,
and even then, even then, but they didn't win the title. Didn't win the title this year. Just gone because Stockport won it. And I think they will find it. I do genuinely think they'll find it difficult because we were finding it difficult to compete, and I think we actually threw quite a few pounds at it to try and get ourselves over the hump, and we couldn't do it. Now they're going to do it, but then they're still going to find a level where that's going to start getting really expensive to get into the
exactly. And as you go up the leagues, the money is less of a differentiator, and the amounts of money you need are much more significant. To your point, Jonny, of like what they're paying Paul Mullen in National League, that's going to be like their lowest player on the payroll when they get to kind of championship level.
And you can call me a loser, and I'm more than willing to have a look at it. But part of the fairy tale that's been missed on that one is that they're actually charging the club interest on the loans for the loans that they've made into the club. So they're actually making money off Wrexham as it goes along. So is that part of the fairy tale? I don't think it is.
It's not front and center. But maybe again those tricky football economics that we're beholden to.
Yeah, to be fair, just the one last thing on like the American ownership style, really, of what you were discussing previously. I think my biggest concern, and we've seen rumours of it this year, that the Birmingham City owners wanted to play the Wrexham game in the league in America. I think that's something that's a real concern by taking football away from its fans. Now, you being an American fan, would love that. Would love to see that your club come in there, but what does that mean to the average person that goes every week? What does that mean to the person that works Monday to Friday to afford his season ticket to go every game, to be told that one of his games is taken away from them? And I think that's something that, because of places, you look at like you said about the way American football teams are owned, there's nothing by going, right, we're taking the Jacksonville Jaguars this week and we're moving them 50,000 miles across the country, and now they're in like Arkansas or something like that. That seems to happen quite regularly, and no one really goes, that's a problem. But in football, you saw Wimbledon get taken from Milton Keynes, and 23 years later, every football fan outside of Milton Keynes absolutely hates them still. And it's because you don't do that for football clubs. And it's something that it's hard, I think, for non-British football people to understand, because the Spanish are doing it, and the Spanish seem comfortable by taking their Super Cup games, for example, been in Saudi Arabia, and they've tried to get to Miami for football, and it's failed still because they've still got their hardcore fans that are going, that's not happening. But that for me is the big concern with the American ownership model, is they don't fully understand what it means. And that kind of goes back to our earlier discussion as well about the community feel and stuff like that. It's what does it mean to that average person that football is their life? Because you'll find at lower league, and the further down the pyramid you go, the more true this gets, that football is that person's life that goes there. That's what they live to do.
Yeah, I think I think, yeah, and this is one of, I think, the central things I wanted to chat with you guys about is for with the exception of MK Dons, right? And I know that story. Every other club was literally just at some point in history was just 11, 12, a handful of people came together, were playing, and decided, hey, we're a club now, and we're going to get into the closest league. And then because you have the promotion relegation system, you have the opportunity to move up the leagues and kind of get more support and interest, and and it goes on and creates kind of that tradition like we talked about earlier. Whereas in American sports, it's typically been like a little bit of that, but then very quickly it became a more corporate structure where like these are franchises and not clubs, right? And I saw it, for example, in Argentina is a great example. Like all of the football clubs there have club members. Like you pay an annual due to be a member of the club. You get voting rights to vote on certain decisions for the club. Within professional American sports, the only voting right you get is your dollars and your attention. But other than that, you have very limited agency and power or privileges to really accomplish anything or have your opinion felt. And that's why we have had some relocations of teams from certain towns to others because the owner came in and had a different vision. Or now what's happening is if an owner won't get certain amount of public funding for their new multi-billion-dollar stadium that they could probably just fund by themselves anyway, then they say they want to leave, and they use that as a bargaining chip, and then it has that ripple effect on the local community and the economy too, right? So I think that is an important distinction to make, is that there is that fundamental difference. And as far as playing matches in other places for like the preseason tours and that, like I say that, hey, there's nothing really riding on this. Sure, it's an opportunity to see. For the diehard abroad, they're going to say, well, it's going to be mostly reserve players or youth players. I'm not really going to get to see, the best team out there, but it is what it is. And you kind of have to accept that it's just in many ways a money grab by the clubs, because they're going to charge you regular, if not more, for ticket prices to see the lesser quality performance. But once you start doing that with actual meaningful matches and saying, oh, we're going to do this here, like the reason that's happening in American sports, like the NFL is going to play a game in Brazil, or they did it in London or Mexico City, is because of like the business decision and what we talked about earlier of the global versus the local fan base. But you can see very quickly, especially with like the, 38, 46, however matches in a season, how that's much different, and it can become a very slippery slope. So I understand the kind of concerns and fears of the English football fan of what that could be if people don't really understand the depth and the roots of that connection.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, is like you see that professional football now, the players are moaning about how much games they're playing, and then at the end of the season, Newcastle and Spurs flew to Australia to play an extra game of football, and it's like, which is it? Are you concerned about player welfare, or are you concerned about money? Like you can't have it both ways in that instance. And then with pre-season, we're now used to your bigger clubs going abroad and stuff like that, which is great if it's planned right and fans who can afford can go, and the global brand and image and stuff like that happens. So yeah, like I've got nothing against the pre-season stuff, but in-season stuff should be ring-fenced to home and away properly, not home and 6,000 miles away.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't the Vale go to the US like years ago? I seem to remember they did a little preseason tour at some point as well abroad in the States.
Yeah, I think there was definitely talk about it with some investment. I don't know if it ever actually materialized, but there was definitely talk of it.
I think they did a few. Yeah, I think they did a week or so, because I can remember being like, oh, it would be great to go, but I think it was in like California or something, and it's totally opposite of me, and it wasn't really gonna work out. But I saw, like, for example, I think it was last year, like Sunderland went abroad and they played some of like like the USL Championship, USL League One, like our lower level teams in the US, and to see like Sunderland fans that are living in that area have a chance to go see them, like that's cool. But again, for the preseason and for that aspect, but Yeah, I agree. You can't be touching like the actual competitive fixtures, and it's a very slippery slope to take away from kind of like that core, because the location is such a strong, gravity and connection for each club. I mean, we could talk for ages about and how football has kind of changed, or some of the benefits or challenges of those things as well. I guess if we bring it back to the Vale and kind of the level that the Vale is at within the league table in England, we're talking about what makes a big club and tradition and things like that. What would be, I don't know, maybe this is paradoxical. What would be like your dream or goal as a Vale supporter, lifelong? Like, what's something you would love to see the Vale do in your lifetime? It could be the obvious, maybe going to the Premier League and playing at that level, or it could be something very different. Like Stu was talking about, a club that represents the certain values that he has off the pitch as well. So what do you think is kind of like a dream you have, for the Vale, or what's important?
Yeah, for me, I've already ticked off a few bits of that. Really, seeing us win at Wembley, for example, that's amazing. Like, the playoffs for it, like, are the best and the worst thing that was ever invented in football, because they're the worst thing in the world if you finish third and then you don't go up. They're the best thing in the world if you come in at seventh and you go up. And seeing that final at Wembley, it's like we got to the final and it couldn't have gone any easier. You watch that game back now, and it was like comfortable 10 men.
Mm-hmm.
We never, apart from the first couple of minutes where we tried to score an own goal, but after that it just didn't seem real. And if you said to me now, you can win the league at the end of the season, or you can go up via the playoffs, and you guarantee me that we're winning at Wembley, that's the best way to do it by far. So that's one thing that's been ticked off for me. Another thing, I'd like to be in the same division as Stoke again, because again, something
yes, absolutely,
and it's one of them things that you look at every country in the world. The local derby is the big game. It's the one that you look forward to. It's the one that you can't go to work on a Monday after the game if you've lost. You can't show your face. You've all got friends. Some people have got family that support teams and stuff. It means it means so much. So that to me would be that. I don't care what league it's in either. I'm not. They can come down, we can go up to it, whichever way around it works. But yeah, the local derby being back would be a dream, because it means so much to each club. And then really just making sure that we keep the community feel and spirit around it whilst trying to do what we can, because we have got a couple of famous fans. Like, we've got Phil Taylor, the darts player, that is a fan of the club and stuff like that. We've got Robbie Williams, for example. Has done a lot for the club in this past 2-3 years now. And whilst it's great to have people like them around, their footprint isn't in Burslem any longer. They're living elsewhere. They're doing other things and stuff like that. So just making sure that the common man is still looked after and stuff like that. So the Premier League doesn't interest me too much. Like, it's not a end game. Whilst, look, if you told me we got there, it'd be a fantastic journey. If you told me we got there and stayed there for a few years, that'd be even better. But it's not one of them things where you hang your hat on. Especially not a club like ours, unless something magical happens and then you're along for the ride. So really, it'd just be getting them local derbies back. That would be that's the next step, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. I think, was it 2 years ago when Vale was drawn against like the Stoke under-21s? Was it the Carabao or whatever? And even then, it was a huge draw, huge gate at Vale Park, even with the youth team. But I think that was the first one in a long time that there's been any local Potteries derby.
Yeah, it was. So it was in the the Johnson's Paint Trophy, which is now the Bristol Street Motors Trophy.
That's right.
And
Okay.
yeah, it's a tournament that's been ruined by the Premier League, but that's probably a discussion for another day. But yeah, so that was, and there was 8,000 people there, and it turned a bit nasty after and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just to have a proper Potteries derby will be out of this world. But it's hard at the moment because of where the two clubs are at and the ownership of the two clubs as well. You've got one of the richest men in the world owning Stoke, for example, and like it's you look at the amount of money that they throw at it to survive is completely the opposite of what we're doing. So
yeah. Yeah, but hopefully sooner or later, right? It's an eventuality, statistics. It's going to make it happen sooner or later. And if not, then at least maybe like a nice FA Cup draw or something like that to add to everything. So Stu, for you, the way we finish every podcast episode is by asking our guest, can you finish this sentence because football?
I am the way I am because football.
A comprehensive and a very whole answer. To that.
It's a reasonable point to make because like I played football from when I was 5 and I'm still attempting to play now, even though my doctors told me to pack it in and I need surgery again. But and then I've coached and I've been a referee and I've been a supporter and I tried to work it out the other day. I've been to see well over 1,000 Vale games. And God knows what else. Been to the World Cup, been to and done all these things. And I just wouldn't be I wouldn't have met my wife if I hadn't gone to the World Cup because I met her at the World Cup in South Africa. So I am the way I am because of football, because football. So that's a reasonable way to finish it up, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll have you back on another episode so we can hear the how you met your wife story. And part of the
Not that
part
interesting.
of the Hollywood official. Awesome.
That was pretty much it.
Well, great to meet you, man. I appreciate it. Awesome. This has been great, Jonny. So I'll ask you now, if you could, I know it's a tough question, but if you could complete this sentence, because football, ...
I suppose because football, I have the friendship circle that I have. I do the things that I do at the weekend, and I say the weekend, I do the things that I do in my life because of football. It's everything is surrounded by that being the end game of where are we going on Saturday.
A lot of ways to live, and choosing the path of football is definitely, one of my favorites. So we appreciate your love for the sport, your passion for your club, and you guys sharing that week in and week out. If anybody here is just maybe not necessarily a Vale supporter, I still recommend giving it a listen because it's just great banter among mates and something I think everybody can connect to. And for anybody listening, if you want to do the same thing, if you love football and want to start like a podcast or something, take this as you don't need anybody's permission, but take it from Jonny and I, like we just kind of decided to do it. And we've got our technological tools and we've got the channels to share, and we just decided to do it. And we don't have any qualifications other than just like that love for the game. So yeah, great times, Jonny, Stu, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming on up the Vale, and everybody else listening. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode.